All right, hello again, everybody. Monday lighting critique. We wanted to start. We've got, as always, we've got a bunch of brilliant images, and we'll go through these in a moment and talk about a couple of these animations and a couple of the still projects that we're doing. But to start, I wanted to answer a question from Aaron and a question from Jordan that I thought were really, really good. The first one was a question from Aaron about just the process of critiquing, and like how do you explain. How do you explain what you're trying to do? Simplifying the technical jargon, and kind of getting your point across. When I started doing this, I studied a lot on the idea of critiquing and feedback and how to give people feedback. And one of the things, and I also was paying attention to how I receive feedback too. And one of the things that I noticed and that I read a lot about was the way that you describe the work matters a lot. Like if I was putting something up there and the art director would be like, okay, this is what you need to do. It was very much about you. It felt like the critiques were about me personally versus when which wasn't the case when the critiques was really more about this thing that you put up, this thing that you created, right? So when you're giving people feedback, I highly recommend never using the word you or your. Talk about the inanimate object. Let's talk about like the image could be brighter, the background could be brighter, not you could make the background brighter. It sounds silly, but it actually really matters when you're working with somebody. If you are going to use a you, use it as a we, because we're trying to make this thing better and we're in this thing collectively. I know that's a small one, but that's always the first advice I give to people whenever we're talking about critiquing. So it's like, and by the way, now I'm about to critique a bunch of images, and I'm sure I'll use the word "you" and mess it up. But that's kind of my first one is when you're, and it's really about a mindset when you're going about it, is thinking about it as this is a collective process of making an image better. So we're trying to improve it through these things, and it's about this third-party thing. In terms of simplifying it and getting past the technical jargon, it's difficult because there is technical jargon inherent in what we do. But I try and relate things to simple real life examples. And I try and just always think back to when I was first starting in this industry and when I didn't understand a lot. But I did like it when people would put things in simple terms. I also would highly recommend rationale for why you're giving a note. If it's like make this brighter, why are we making it brighter? What's the goal of doing that? Like if it's just like okay, it's like when you're doing a tutorial and they're like okay, now set this to 0.4, change this to this, change that to that, and you're like I don't know why I'm doing these things, right? But if you can explain the process, that's a really big component, and like what these individual notes are trying to lead towards, because also that's a good thing to communicate too, because if what you're trying to build somebody else towards is different than their vision, then they can stop you and say no, that's not what I want to do, versus just doing it for the sake of doing it, which doesn't really teach anybody anything. As far as the rest of it, like critiquing is like lighting is like anything else. The more you do it, the more comfortable that you get at it. And actually the better it'll make you as an artist on your own work, which is why I'm always I try and encourage you guys to like contribute to these critiques and also provide written critiques for people, because it's a really, really, really important process in the learning. But yeah, that's my spiel on that. If you have more questions, let me know. And then Jordan asked about render times, about like why in the industry render times will be longer than here, than you working yourself. And the biggest reason is it's just more complex scenes. Like you don't think about it, but there are lots of times there's very big crowds in it. Lots of times it's the character being very close to the camera with high res shaders and fur, and moving very quickly and requiring motion blur. Motion blur really adds to your render time too. But there are lots of times on an animated film where your renders will take 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. You only hear about the really long ones, The ones that take days. No, like the other ones aren't really worth mentioning, right? Like when it renders fast, it's like, oh yeah, it just rendered fast. There you go. But I mean,
Yeah, this is we were talking about that,
mhm.
and I mentioned that Toy Story 4 on average had 7 hours per frame of
Yeah.
rendering. Yeah.
So I mean, Toy Story 4, a big set piece for that was the carnival, which was outdoor. I think they were surrounded by trees. There's a ton of set pieces. I mean, like, there's no fur in any of it. There's not like complex shading or complex geometry. It's just a lot sometimes. Um, it's also a really funny thing. So Pixar and Blue Sky had the same issue, um, which was like Pixar makes Render Man, right? And so bragging about how long something takes to render isn't good for business. Blue Sky made Studio, which was like our proprietary render that we didn't sell to the public, but it was the technology that our company was based on. So we were always highly encouraged to not brag about that, because like in oftentimes, I don't know what our averages were, but I do know that if the frame wasn't taking longer than 30 hours a frame, we didn't worry about it. It was like it just is what it is, and that's like we'll just turn it through. Once it got over 30 hours a frame, then we'd start to debug it a little bit, but um, but that was it. But yeah, it's mostly just like crowds, forests, trees, lots of geo, same stuff. We don't really have anything, like the computers that we get aren't special. They're good ones off the shelf. Um, yeah, the renderers generally, unless they're proprietary, in which case the proprietary ones aren't necessarily any better than the off the shelf ones. Like Pixar just uses RenderMan the same that you guys do. They just have more access to the developers.
Speaking of speed,
Yeah.
how much like how big are the files themselves? Like that's just say for like one sequence. Like we keep talking about like how fast it takes to render, but like I'm already coming up with these basic scenes that are having like 30 gigabytes just for, which is small in comparison, I'm sure, but like 30 gigabytes just for like a 60 frame sequence.
Yeah. So the gigabyte, like that doesn't matter how long things are, because that's just loading in data. That's like how much the set is, how much the rig is, how heavy this stuff is, how heavy that stuff is. We had honestly, it's all about like what the machines are capable of. Because I had a couple shots in my career where you couldn't load the entire shot in a file. Like you couldn't load it all at once. You had to load it in components and then like those and then piece them together like it was an effects shot or like a VFX film. But 30 gigs for Maya file. It's like is that like one individual file, or is that the amount of RAM that you're using?
Well, not for the mile file, more for like once you render it out, what the sequence would be in terms of size that way. Like after it's already been rendered out and you look at that file, you look at that EXR file, like how much, I mean, obviously I know it depends on how many AOVs you have in it, and all that stuff, and like you said, texture size and quality.
Yeah.
But it's a lot just for a basic one.
Yeah, I mean, you get huge, like in the industry, you get huge cloud storing capabilities. So like honestly, I didn't worry about file size too much. I mean, we would get pinged about it, and you do things like make sure to limit your AOVs, limit the render layers that you're putting out. If you can render them at a smaller size, also that crop to format in Maya is really helpful in saving out smaller files. But in terms of for me, and this is again the joy of working in a large studio, is you have terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of storage available to you, so I don't really think about it that much. It was more about the time.
Yeah, and for file sizes, I've also found that like the compression and what you're rendering out makes a big difference. Like for instance, for Cryptomats, zip compression is way smaller, but for anything else, DWAV is way smaller, so I render them out separately. Like those can make differences, so you should test it out a little bit.
Yeah,
you can.
In the Redshift class, Shane goes through the compression types really, really well in that, and that's translatable to a lot of things. So like, I was getting mixed up, but I think the DWM, that one does really well on still images. Other compression types do really well on certain types of animation, because they all compress in different ways, and sometimes the lossy ones are good in some situations and can really save you a lot of file size.
I would say like, naming in your own personal computer system, like your naming structure is key too. Because like if you label things in the way that tells you like, quickly what your sources are, you can just go mass delete gigs and gigs and gigs worth of EXR images. Whereas like at a studio, I mean, we have a system, like most studios will have like kind of their internal system that flags things as important or flags things as being used, and then when they're not used, like they just get mass deleted out of the system, and that's not really your job. But like, yeah, at home, you can clear tons of info by just knowing off the bat like what your source image files are,
Yeah.
and which ones aren't being used and stuff.
Yeah, that's a really, really fair point. Because you're right, those EXR files get massive. Like for like that 300 frame animation for this next lighting challenge, if you threw the kitchen sink at them with AOVs and everything else, like those files would get very large very quickly, and it would be like the only thing you could keep on your computer. So that's kind of, and so like a lot of that too is just making sure that any AOV that you write out is actually useful. Like if you're not using it, don't waste the storage space for it. So all right, let's hop into some images. Thanks, guys. Any other questions about that before we move on? All right, Brenda, you're here. Yes. Okay, this is looking a lot better. I like it overall. I think the books are kind of popping forward. I think we've got some depth of field in there. That's looking really good. I'm questioning in my head right now. Oh, this looks better too. The shader on this looks a lot better. I'm wondering if we can't push the depth of field a little bit more. Maybe.
Okay.
Like a touch. Just like push it just like a touch more. In the pixel or two. In terms of value, I think that we can go a little darker right here, like right next to this window. I think that'll help kind of frame that up a little bit more.
Okay.
What are you guys thinking? This? Maybe like a little bit of specularity on this umbrella too, just because they're usually kind of plasticky.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about the depth of field. It kind of like I would expect the books in the foreground to be a lot more out of focus than the window in the background. So I don't know, maybe just make those a little bit out of focus.
The books here? Or the books in the foreground? Yeah.
Those.
Yeah. And I'm just nudging up the mid-tone values and nudging down the dark values to create a little more contrast in there. Like I think something like this, like adding, like darkening the darks a little bit and then just like lifting those brights could help a little bit too.
Okay.
Yeah. Just pull this back a little bit. Yeah. But I think this is coming together well. The balance is really starting to get there. All right, cool. Yeah, good job.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Is it Felipe or Felipe? What's your preferred pronunciation? Okay, if you're there. I'm gonna go with Felipe for now. Hope that's right. Okay, so we've got 2 images submitted here from you. We've got the Sir Desmond Rotundus and then the girl and the robot. So for this one, I love the cool color scheme. I think it's going to allow his warm values to pop off. I think you've got one of the main difficulties that we have here is the specularity on his face. You're kind of nailing that. I think it would be some things to watch out for. You've got good shaping coming across, but there's like a tight line that's right down his ear here that is indicating a very tight shadow. Also, there's some wackiness going on with the fur. right in here, where it's like there's some fur, and then there's like the alpha isn't quite right on it. So just double check that. And then for the rest of his body, like I think there's some room for improvement on the rest of the body to match like the level of detail that we're getting on the face. Like there's this much light coming in, kind of from this side hitting him, and we're not seeing it all in here. We're not really getting a good sense of bright light hitting this. We want to pick up that kind of leathery wrinkle. We want to see some specularity on there. The cape back here feels very gray. There could be, like, it could be black, like what's going on around his neck here. And then also it feels like there's just like a light kind of emitting upward underneath him. That's not really indicated anywhere else. It's just kind of like right down here. And then, yeah, I think, and then, yeah, because we want to feel some sort of value shift from like here, like from this side of this wing to this side of this wing should feel different somehow. And it just kind of starts to flatten out a little bit in there. Also, like the cane is getting very bright in here while the skin isn't getting that same amount of light around it. But yeah, I mean, it's a good start. Like I said, you've nailed one of the most difficult components of this, which is the specularity on his skin on his face. It's just getting the other components up to that level. Any other comments on this?
I think the hat's getting a bit blown out on that one side,
Yeah.
and then the other side's blending in with the background.
Yeah. So let's tone that down a little bit. Maybe put in like, because these hats kind of have like that very tight horizontal, like I don't know what it is. It's like something about the weave or how it's made. It's just like a bunch of strings that are tightly wound, and you kind of start to see that in the specularity. And then getting a little rim or kick light on this side to kind of get that to separate off.
And then I think what I like about that light that's under him is, and I went back and I looked at other Desmodos, is it really like accentuates how skinny his legs are, and it almost has like a comedic effect, which I think you could play up if like you decide to keep it and then want it to, like you were saying, have that light impact other areas as well.
It's funny. Yeah, for sure. His legs are super skinny. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, it's the first time I've thought about it.
Yes. I thought about it. It's shocking how little I've thought about this guy's legs. Okay. And then for your other one, I think that I like the framing on it. I think that's kind of cool. I do think that we can go darker back over here just to kind of get that to kind of fall back. There's something about the background plate, because we're kind of looking down. By the way, I'm realizing I'm like falling off camera here. We're looking down at it, but like the tree level feels like we're looking straight out. Like we would see the ground at some point out here. So it feels like like the angle would be a little bit more downward. But that being said, I think it's fine because it's just kind of indicating and telling us what's going on outside. But then I want to kind of tighten up the lighting on the characters a little bit because it's nice and soft overall, but I do kind of want to create like more of a distinct kind of almost like a specific light source which is coming in from the outside. It's a little bit of a tighter rim light on them, and then watch out for the sharp line here, and then like some brightness right down around his butt area. Because overall I think same thing. Maybe go a little bit brighter, a little more contrasty overall. What are you guys thinking?
I think that the bump on the cushion and the curtains could be brought back a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good call. Yeah, because what it is, it's like we're seeing the sky out here. Sorry, I have to go back to this. And it's like that would... It's throwing me off. And then when we were talking about, if you get a chance to watch the critique of this, it was... I like the style that you're building this eye, but it's going to be real important to get that to feel right. So if it's like you're kind of going the headlight approach with it, like really kind of make it look like the headlight of a car, and then play that up as more of like an eyeball. And what we were seeing is people were kind of moving that around too, so getting it to look down at the book would be good or something like that. Yeah. And then kind of deciding too whether or not this light is on or off. I think actually in this situation it would probably be better if it was just off and we were seeing some refraction through the glass, because like we don't necessarily need it on for any reason. Right. Okay, Forrest. Let's take a look at your super cool dyno setup. So I love you're really great with your reference selections and your presentation of those. I love seeing your reference stuff. Also, I do want to commend you as well for everyone else who was watching this. Forrest saw something cool on LinkedIn and reached out to the artist, and that's how we got this. I highly encourage anyone else to do that as well. If you're just LinkedIn especially, people are very open to getting their stuff lit. So make sure you check out that. Okay, so let's first answer your question about the eyes, because it's tricky, right? Like the way that we present it is always like, when the eyes are built this way, this is how you make the eying, and then oftentimes you'll encourage eyes that don't look like that look like this for some reason. So what you can do, you kind of have three options. One is you can try it the traditional way that we talked about, but I don't think it would work very well. Number two is you can actually paint like an eyeding onto the eye in the shader. That, I mean, for this type of style, that could work because it's a little more cartoony. It's like the Crash Bandicoot reference. It's kind of a little bit more cartoony. You can get away with that. The third one is we are working with a developer now. He's my friend Jason, who I used to light with, on creating an eyeding tool, an eye reflection tool to use in comp. So you can't, there could potentially be a comp solution, but like I still am not convinced that would work with this given the geometry. So if it was me, I would just try maybe painting an eyeding in there, which I don't necessarily like to do, but in this style I think it could work out okay. And that way you can just kind of give his eyes a little bit more of a robust look in here, and then it's also like there's no iris, right? Like it's just all pupil. Maybe like painting one into the shader too, so like the outside of these polys are the iris. Actually, let's go like further in like that. Like all this stuff is iris color, and then just that is pupil color or whatever, however that works out. That might make his eyes look super dilated, but whatever. Like I think that's the way that I would do it. I would take this and just paint it, and then paint an eyeding on there.
Cool. Can I ask what the answer was you guys kind of came up with that you weren't sure about? Like what your solution was initially? You said like, oh, we had talked about something earlier, and you're not sure if it's going to work or whatever.
We talked about the basically what I was saying was that the normal prescription for eyes that we talk about in the courses, like put some reflection cards around, trying to do that stuff. With this type of geometry, I think it gets. I think doing it that way would reveal this geometry and make the eye feel very strange immediately. And so it would be next to impossible. It would be very, very difficult to get this geometry to look good using the traditional like reflection cards and that kind of thing. That I think for this instance it might be better just to paint it on there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's take a look at the. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question for the eyeding.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's an animated scene, so I wouldn't even know how to do that. But if you put just a globe of glass
Mm-hmm.
around it, wouldn't it give you normal eyedings that would?
It would definitely. It could. Yeah. It could. That's a fair one too. If you just put an outer, like a cornea on it.
That's what I was going to suggest is do a cornea pass, and then like obviously don't render the cornea out with any of your hero geometry, but then like use the cornea as just a reflection or just a a highlight catcher and comp that in. Like,
Because you don't necessarily, I mean, I don't know the full animation on this, but like you don't really need it back here as much. It's really just about when he's like up in here that you need a little something. Okay, let's take a, because let's take a look at the reference real quick. Crocodile reference is really cool. So this was provided by the animator?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the textures are provided by the modeler who wanted me to keep with that stuff. So it's kind of been a fun challenge to have like a hero color and some reference from the animator.
Yeah. So, okay. So in terms of the lighting, the one thing that we want to do, our lighting in a situation like this, for me, it's always about having a couple of goals. The first of which is we want to, so this is a character performing on a stage, essentially. So we want to kind of highlight this area here in the foreground, right? Like we want, so I think for me, it would be kind of about, because like we have a clearing here with no trees around it. So theoretically light could come in and light that up. And then it would allow the background to kind of be in darkness and fall back there. But then, so we have our main stage. And then the other idea would be to communicate the depth of the scene. And that comes down to having like pockets of sunlight kind of coming through and hitting some of these background trees. And so you can kind of see it like layering back into space by like different light and dark patches going back there. Now, it's a pretty thick canopy, so we're not going to see a whole lot of that. But you want to see a little bit of dapple of light coming through. And then we've got the God rays coming down, and then we have aerial perspective. We have the atmospheric fog happening, and we just kind of want to layer that back. For the color of that, I would go a little bit cooler bluish, maybe even greenish to fall back into the space. It's like when you start to see like stuff like this, it feels almost like smoke instead of atmospheric perspective. And then like you can peel it off a little bit off of this foreground stuff and then just allow it to build a little bit more. And so this is the character lighting. He is very saturated as a character, which is, but like I think that your initial pass on him works pretty well, I think. The light coming in here. Is the light coming in, is it from behind? Like it's definitely coming in from the screen left side, but would you say it's behind him, in front of him, or kind of equal to him in terms of like depth? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I have he's being hit by like that sun on him, and then I've like tried to like build that up there, like kind of right above those plants on the left side is a AI light down on him, and then I have another in the foreground that he walks into.
Okay, so I think in this one, I think I would tone. I think it would be. It feels more like the light would be coming in from behind him a little bit. So I would play it up where like, you know, the tail kind of gets lit a little bit more on like that side. The head is more a little bit like brighter on this side, and then this, it's more like almost like a rim behind him. I should put my hand this way. It's like a rim coming in behind him, and that would allow some of this to go a little bit darker in the foreground here. Because I wonder. Yeah, I think that because it's feeling a little flat coming in from that left side. It's like because like the value on his tail, his body, and his head feel pretty similar. And I'm wondering if by pushing it back behind him a little bit more, we can create more light to dark, like leading up his body. And then once we get in here, we're gonna want figure out a way to get some more light rattling around inside of his mouth. It's a little dark in there.
Cool.
And we might have to punch up his tongue a little bit more too. If his skin is that saturated, we might want to, because his tongue feels pretty photoreal, and making that a little goofier too would be good. All right, cool. Any other comments on this one? This is a good start. Also getting some specularity on it depends on the look. But traditionally, I usually like to add a lot of like, because plants are very waxy and they have like a thick coat on them. So getting some specularity on there really kind of helps break them up a little bit. Yeah.
Cool. Do that.
Grass is tough. I give you credit for trying that. I would just put them on dirt.
Oh yeah, I struggled getting Xgen working. Diana helped me a whole bunch.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm glad I've learned a fraction of the book. Xgen.
Good stuff. All right, cool. Let's take a look at, we've got these images from Kat. It's from, all right. So, all right, the pockets of light, I think, work a lot better. There are some times like here where I'm not quite sure what's lighting him from underneath. Like it's a lot, like I would expect it to be a little darker at this point from there. So I'm not quite sure if that's bounce light or like.
Well, I put a bounce card in, but even when I removed it, I actually have some lights that are coming up underneath to light him. I don't know if I want him to be fully in shadow because they've got expressions going on, so I didn't know how dark we wanted it. I mean, it should be a little darker. I just wasn't sure how dark we need to make that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll play around with that, but like once we get that in place, it would be a matter of like trying to make sure that we maintain, shaping all throughout their different poses, which will be tricky. I think for your next step, so I think
it's kind of the red and blue where it should be, because I mean I know in the references it was about half. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think that looks good though, because you're kind of getting a play of both colors.
Yeah, I agree. I think like seeing them back here, kind of the combination of the two is working out well. I am wanting a little bit more out of the ceiling because we see so much of it. There's sometimes because it's like you've got it's tricky because you've got detail there and then this just kind of feels very matte back there. So maybe adding just like a subtle.
Yeah, I kind of have this set up as concrete.
Yeah. Since
I'm thinking warehouse would be concrete, but I can maybe put a little more spec into it or something.
Just put some bump then. Make it a bump like concrete then. And that'll help. And then. But the next big step, I think, for this one is just for now, I think, because like as we start to dial this in, I think I would take a stab at their skin tones right now because like she feels green to me, like there's too much green in her skin value and her hue, so I would like to try and get that a little bit warmer. And then,
do you think some of that's reflecting from her outfit? Because if you look at the shots where you don't see her outfit, I don't know if she looks as green. Because her outfit's kind of reflective.
Yeah,
if you like the opening shot, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of green throughout, so that could be the case. Maybe just for testing purposes, try putting a different color outfit on her and see if that helps. But I think that like just looking at her here. So
okay.
I would just, like you kind of want to. That's a little too much, but.
Okay.
Yeah, I would take a stab at just kind of warming her up a little bit, and just see what it goes. And then.
Okay.
And then we can go from there. And but I think the rest of it's starting to work.
I darkened him down so he doesn't look as phosphorescent.
Yeah,
he was looking pretty white there at the beginning.
It might be a matter of like getting just some more detail on their skin, like some because it looks like some subsurface, and then also just yeah. Yeah, I kind of was messing with the bump, and I put subdivision on them, and I think it made them too specky now, so I need to kind of mess around with that. I was trying to make them look a little less plasticky, so I did some subdividing on them. Yeah, it depends too. I mean, like also like giving them, different color on their lips, just some other stuff like that could, like those little details could be helpful. So I think maybe just take a day to take a stab at their shaders and just see where you can get with there. Okay. Does the floor look okay? I can't decide if I like it or not. It's a concrete texture, and then I've kind of been messing with it. Same thing with the floors with the walls. Like the color is fine. It's just that if it's going to be concrete, we need to read the bump and like a normal map or something on there, to make it feel like concrete, right? Because that has a very distinct pattern to it that we really want to see.
Okay, I'll mess around with the bump on it then and see if I can get it better.
Yeah, like I said, you can find like Material Haven would be a good one.
Yeah, I have a prefabbed concrete shader on the floor. I think some of it is just dialing it in because when he's laying on the floor, when I first did it, it was super bumpy. It was like it looked like he was laying on dirt. I'm like, yeah, that's not what I want because it doesn't need to be that obvious. So.
But yeah, you can find like there's a whole concrete section. So like stuff like this, you can play with it with like the different, types. But like getting that level of variation in there will that's what makes it feel like concrete, right? Because the color is just like a matte gray. Like that's just like a gray amber. But getting that in there, I think would really help out a lot.
Okay, cool.
Sound good? Cool.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good.
Anybody else have any questions or anything before we break for the day? All right, that is all for today, everybody. So get out, go light, go have fun, and I will talk to you all very soon. We'll keep you posted if we hear more. If anyone has, if we hear more about the UVs, I will keep you guys posted on that. But I will talk to you soon. All right, happy lighting, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.